Hey everyone, today we're diving into something that I believe every dog guardian needs to understand before jumping into training. These are the 13 categories of your dog's welfare that have to be addressed first before you expect solid reliable behavior. We're going to break it all down, but this episode is for you if you, number one, have a dog, but also if you've ever thought, why is my dog so distracted? Why can't they focus outside? Or they know this at home, so what's going on when we're out in public or we're at the park? Before we dive in though, I first want to say welcome back to the Collab Dog Training Podcast, where we believe the most successful service dog teams train through collaboration, not control. My name is Lisa. I'm a certified professional dog trainer and the host of this podcast. If you like this episode, I encourage you to rate and review this podcast. And if you know someone who is either self-training their service dog, training their dog for therapy work, or just simply like to go everywhere they can with their dog, be sure to share this episode, as enrichment is a really valuable tool for anyone that has a dog. Here's the truth. Training doesn't start with the clicker, the leash, or the treat pouch. It starts with your dog's body and brain. So I've made you a totally free Notion template that walks you through each of these 13 welfare needs so you can track them and figure out what your dog might be missing. I'll include a link to this in the show notes or the video description, but I'm going to walk you through this. What I love about this template is that you can download the free Notion app, not just on your computer, but on your phone, and you can use this template to check off your habits right from your phone. It's flexible, customizable, and something you can actually stick to. Quick heads up also, some of the examples that I'm going to cover under each category do overlap. And also, I do want to mention that every dog is different. Breed, personality, background, current lifestyle, all of those play a role. So don't worry if your dog's individual needs don't line up exactly with someone else's. Now, I want to provide a little bit of context as well when we talk about welfare, enrichment, etc. But I'm going to focus on the word enrichment because that word has been thrown around a lot. And basically the idea of enrichment actually started off in zoos. Staff were trying to improve the mental health of captive animals by replicating behaviors they'd naturally perform in the wild. Sloths would get hanging from branches, giraffes would get high up food stations, and so on. But dogs are a little bit trickier because of human breeding. We've intentionally selected for traits. Some dogs really love to chase small animals. Some dogs prefer to just snuggle and be on your lap. Some dogs were bred to guard, and others were to swim, retrieve, herd. And when you add additional mixed breeds in the picture, or just poor breeding practices where they're not really breeding for the specific temperament that breed was meant for, you can get a large bag of a variety of different behaviors that different dogs like to do. So it's always important to look at your individual dog and what they enjoy. Okay, so let's go ahead and dive into each of the 13 categories. First is going to be health and veterinary care. This is the dog's foundation as well as any sentient living being. This is because if they're in pain, sick, or even just mildly uncomfortable, training isn't going to stick as well, or it's going to feel like you're kind of going uphill in your training and it's going to feel harder. You might think, oh, health and vet care, like obviously my dog's fine. I take him to the vet, but I'm talking about digging a little bit deeper in terms of health. So an example would be, sleep is huge. There are more and more studies that show that sleep is really, really important for all dogs, but especially for young puppies and adolescents. Dogs that are overtired, they get cranky, overstimulated, and emotionally dysregulated, just like humans do. It's almost like the more you have insomnia, the worse your sleep becomes and the harder it is to sleep. It kind of creates this perpetual cycle that makes it really hard for dogs to regulate their emotions. And so rest is really, really important, not just for prepping for your training, but also for their brains to be functioning and retaining all of the learning that they're doing through training. And I'm sure you can relate to this as a living human being that, when you don't sleep well, it's much harder to do certain tasks that may not be hard to do when you're rested. Another thing I like to talk about when it comes to health and vet care is pain as well. So a lot of dogs, not all dogs, but a lot of dogs do like to hide their pain. I've noticed with a lot of dogs, when they're in pain, they become more reactive to sounds. And when I say reactive, I mean like more barking or more hypervigilance or just general feelings of anxiety around things that maybe they didn't used to have anxiety around. So especially with senior dogs, most senior dogs are going to be in some level of pain. You'll start to notice they're a little bit more reactive, a little bit less resilient, and that's because of the underlying pain. And of course, younger dogs can be in pain as well. And so just noticing maybe even like subtle experiences of discomfort can help you better understand why you may be having trouble with your training. So an example would be if you're working on having your dog ignore other dogs and maybe they are in pain and they tend to bark at other dogs in the distance. It's going to be really hard. Not that you can't train, and you'll still train kind of in the same way, but managing that pain is going to help improve your training. If you think about it, if you've ever had a migraine, it's a lot harder to focus than if you feel great. The other thing I want to touch on too is like in the moment discomfort. So in the moment discomfort would be like a puppy that you've been training for a while and they've been getting quite a few treats maybe, and they're thirsty, and in your head, you're like, the water is right there. But the puppy's like, I don't want to miss out on these treats. I'm going to stay here. And they'll kind of put off getting water. So sometimes with younger puppies, you do have to guide them to the water bowl so that they can drink their water. The second one is going to be hygiene. I want you to think nails, ears, coat care, teeth. If your dog is itchy, matted, has goopy ears, they're not going to be able to focus as well. Long nails can contribute to pain as well, right? Because their gait will change with longer nails. So we want to make sure we're staying on top of their nails. Just a quick analogy, if you've ever tried to focus while you're really itchy. I still have eczema, but when I was growing up, I had a really, really bad eczema flare up many times actually in middle school and high school. And it is really hard to focus. I think with humans, just the feeling of being itchy constantly, it was really hard for me to focus in school sometimes, not just with ADHD, but because of how itchy I was. And so if your dog has allergies as well, once again, it doesn't mean that you're not going to train at all, but it's maybe having a understanding or empathy for your dog that they may need to move a little slower as you're figuring out their allergies. In an ideal world, we would just figure out the allergies, but food allergies can get complicated sometimes. So doing the best we can do to make sure that they're comfortable. The third aspect I want to talk about is diet and nutrition. So whether your dog is hungry or overfed or on a food that doesn't suit them, it can really affect their behavior as well. So mood, digestion, and energy levels all affect behaviors. So the same thing, if your dog is too overweight, then they're going to start to feel joint pain. That kind of goes back to kind of that overlap. But I always recommend a prebiotic and a probiotic for all dogs, and omega-3 supplement like a fish oil if you can. I'm not a vet. This is just from personal experience. I find that 99% of dogs can benefit from that. And then of course, you can always add in more supplements depending on your specific dog and what your vet recommends. But another analogy is like if you're really, really starving, it's going to be really hard to focus in class or focus on a lecture. So think about it from your dog's perspective. If they're starving, even if that helps with their food motivation, it's going to be a lot harder to retain information. The fourth one I want to talk about is physical exercise. So it's not just about getting as long of a walk in as you can, because just like us, our dogs can get sore as well or injuries. So it's about appropriate movement. A lot of dogs are bred to walk long distances. But I also say, like, if your dog hasn't walked a long distance in a long time, and then if you have a young puppy, their joints and their bones are not all set in yet, which can cause injury as well. So there definitely is a sweet spot when it comes to physical exercise, and that would be up to your vet to kind of let you know. But from a behavior perspective, too much exercise can cause soreness and crankiness. And I'm sure you have experienced overdoing your exercise before. When I was in my early 20s, I did a ton of CrossFit, and I was like determined to work out as much as I could. And I would do like 2 classes a day, and I injured myself. And that's because I overdid it. And then after that, I couldn't work out for a long time because I injured my low back, and that's a whole nother story. So then I had too little exercise, which can cause frustration, anxiety, all of that. There's also other types of physical exercise other than just taking your dog on a walk. For example, flirt pole is an example of physical exercise. I also have a Canine Fitness Foundations course for free that you can access just by participating. So the way the platform works is if you comment, like, engage, you get points, and then certain points unlock different courses. So if you're interested in that course, I encourage you to join my school community. I'll include a link below. And then of course, lure coursing, dock diving, swimming, there's a lot of types of physical exercise. So it's not just about taking your dog on a walk. The next one is going to be sensory stimulation. Dogs are sensory creatures, and they interact with the world through sniffing, exploring, listening, tasting, and observing. But too often we forget that they need variety in those experiences to stay fulfilled. Sensory enrichment can look like smell, so letting your dog sniff on walks, and introducing novel scents, like maybe switching the route on your walk so that they have different new things to smell. It could also be taking them to somewhere like Petco or PetSmart, where they can smell all the various different animals that have been there. Another one is tactile stimulation, varying surfaces like walking on grass or sand, letting them dig, splash in water, or interacting with toys that have different textures. In dog fitness training, we'll use Fit Paws equipment, which have little sensory little bumps on their equipment to help with some of that tactile stimulation. Sound is also another aspect of sensory stimulation. So some dogs do enjoy listening to soft music or nature sounds when you're gone, or just throughout the day. And taste can be another aspect of sensory stimulation. So rotating food, using different food toppers for their main meal, and letting them explore new flavors. This can keep mealtime also interesting and engaging as well. The most important aspect of all of this, not just for sensory stimulation, but for every type of enrichment, is letting your dog choose how and when they want to engage. True sensory enrichment means providing opportunities for that sensory input without pressure. We want them to want to be exposed to that. Safety is another big one. So if your dog doesn't feel safe in a space, they're not going to be able to learn, because when their safety is compromised, obviously, their brain is focused on how to get to safety. Survival mode shuts down the learning brain, and this can include things like noise sensitivity in the house. So let's say your apartment is really loud all the time. There's a lot of different noises, and your dog has a sound sensitivity. Since moving is it's not a very doable recommendation. Ideally, yes, move, but that's not really realistic for most people. So even exploring something with your vet, like behavioral medication, there's actually a sound sensitivity medication called Sileo, Sileo, that a lot of people have said is very effective. But also it can be things like if you have a lot of kids in the house and maybe they like to pull your dog's tail, and having a safe area for your dog is going to really, really help with making sure they feel safe. So safety doesn't always mean like how we perceive safety, but how the dog perceives safety. This kind of ties into the next aspect of enrichment, which is security. So think of this more like emotional safety. So the last one, we talked more about physical safety or physical perceived safety. Emotional safety is going to be more like having routines, predictability, trusting your handler. So from the dog's perspective, trusting the handler, knowing what's expected. Dogs need that consistency. And so let's say their bed is that safe space and you feed them at a specific time every day. if you take a road trip with them, maybe bringing their bed with them and maybe having some of those routines in place. So just keep in mind that we also want to be realistic. So obviously, if you're going out of town, you have to have a dog sitter, or if you're not bringing them on the road trip, or even if you are bringing them on the road trip, that's going to kind of mess up that routine and predictability. So just making it as predictable as possible. And even like maybe you bring them on a shorter road trip first. So there's a lot of different ways to help your dog feel more secure when maybe the situation that is coming up is not going to have that same predictability. Next is going to be instinctual behavior. So this is a big one. Digging, chewing, chasing, herding. These are hardwired. This one specifically is going to vary a lot from dog to dog because a lot of this is going to be breed specific, but even within breeds, individuals will vary. So you really want to look at your individual dog and whether they like doing these things and whether you can find an outlet for them. Let's say your dog really likes shredding. If your dog has no outlet for this, this can turn into shredding, furniture or shredding things that you don't want shredded. Same with digging. Digging is a natural dog behavior. So you want to allow them areas that are appropriate to dig. My favorite for shredding is actually using dried seaweed, which is called nori in Japan. And that is a great option for shredding because they can eat it too. It's low calorie and it kind of, if your dog, I also recommend to some people like letting your dog on cue, of course, because you don't want them randomly doing this, but on cue. So I say rip or destroy to an Amazon box and have them rip that. But some dogs actually try to eat the box. So for those types of dogs, seaweed would be a better option, or nori, because they can eat it and it still has that same shredding effect. I personally like to kind of like rip it up halfway and then have them bite the one half and kind of like let them rip it so it feels like they're actually ripping something. With herding, things like a flirt pole or a lure course, there's a lot of dog sports out there too that are great for some of these instinctual behaviors. Like I said, this one does vary, so it really is going to depend on your specific dog and what they like to do. All right, so the next one is going to be foraging. And so this is going to apply to most dogs because it's not as breed specific, but rather than feeding from a bowl every day, you want them to actually work a little bit for their food, which will boost confidence and reduce frustration. We don't want to make it too hard, but having something like a snuffle mat or scatter feeding, puzzles, things like that are great. The easiest way to kind of do this type of foraging exercise with their food is to use a snuffle mat, and it's the easiest way to keep the house clean as well. You can scatter food around the house, but if your dog doesn't find all of them, then there's, food sitting around, right? If your dog eats raw or fresh food, there's other ways to, make it a little bit more fun. So you could put it on a lick mat. I always get people that are like, but I feed my dog raw or I feed my dog fresh food. And you can always switch it up. Now, full disclosure too. So my dog, Ziggy, he's 11 and he has stage 3 kidney disease. He eats fresh food and it's already hard enough to get him to eat because he has kidney disease. And so I don't really make it into a snuffle mat or a puzzle toy because he already barely wants to eat. So he's not going to work for food, not his kidney food. He'll work for better treats, but he can't have those right now. My point is that I'm not going to have him work for his kidney food or else he just wouldn't eat. Like I said, the disclaimer is we're working with your specific dog. This episode is more talking about dogs generally. So, not every single one is going to apply to every single situation. I just have to remind people. Next is number 10, which is positive social interactions. At first, I was just going to say social interactions, but I think a lot of people force social interactions on their dogs with maybe dogs that are not the best behaved, or like they take them to a dog park where there's a lot of dogs that are unfulfilled and maybe can possibly bite your dog, which is a negative social interaction. So positive social interactions, meaning finding dogs that your dog enjoys their company with and, setting up play dates with those dogs. And it doesn't even have to be an actual play date where they play in a yard. If you have an older dog, maybe it's just like going to the brewery with your friend and their dog. But I think having dogs coexist together, like they're both sniffing, taking a walk, is still a social need being met. I think a common misconception is that dogs playing equals socialization, but they don't have to play. Just being in the company of another dog is great. Just like people do different things, right? Like sometimes you work out with your friends, sometimes you go watch a movie. So it doesn't have to be like actual dogs playing with each other. The next one is important, which is going to be mental exercise, which to be honest, like a lot of these are mental exercise as well. Like when I talked about snuffle mats, that's also mental exercise. But I wanted to put this as its own category because mental exercise is important for every dog. And if you don't provide mental exercise, your dog will find their own way of providing mental exercise or getting frustrated. And so training does count with this. So doing shaping games, scent work, any kind of problem solving. And so when I say mental exercise, just because this is really relevant to me right now with my dog Ziggy, like I said, he's 11 and he has arthritis and kidney disease. So I have to get a little bit creative since I'm not doing snuffle mats. He can't have a ton of treats or anything like that. So I love doing like basic shaping exercises with him, like teaching him to turn his head to the right or to the left, but using free shaping, which is where you don't tell them anything. You just use the clicker to shape the behavior. And so that's a really good one that pretty much any dog can do, whether they're older or even a puppy. But free shaping is essentially where you slowly shape the specific behavior you're looking for. And this is actually how they train animals in a lot of zoos. So if you want to teach a chimpanzee to open their mouth for getting their teeth brushed, you would use free shaping for that. And so free shaping is a really great exercise, not just for you as the handler who is also training. It's also a great exercise for using their brain a little bit more. Number 12 is a big one, especially for service dogs or any kind of working dog, which is going to be independence. And I think of independence in kind of two different ways. So allowing your dog to have alone time when needed, like having a room they can go to, which I talked about in security and safety, but also independence to kind of make choices when appropriate. So not just service dogs and working dogs, but also pet dogs. We control a lot of what they do every day. So we control when it's time to eat. We control where they go. We pretty much control their life. So having opportunities where they can make choices are going to be really important. So some ways you can do this are a long line leash, taking a safari walk. Maybe it's doing cooperative care where they get to make a choice to opt in or not. So giving your dog those moments where they can have some choice to opt in to specific activities is a huge relationship booster. And it's also a huge type of reinforcement. Having freedom of choice is such an undervalued type of reinforcement. And I would argue that it's higher value than food. The reason why we use food for training is because it's harder to, connect a specific behavior with the ability to make a choice. Although not 100% because you can do that with cooperative care, but every living being values the ability to make a choice. And when that is taken away from us, it's a huge source of frustration for a lot of animals. And so I think a really good one for this is doing nose work training or starting with taking a long line leash walk where they lead the way and you kind of just follow them. Okay, so number 13 is going to be calming and regulation. Just like people, dogs need intentional downtime. Not just naps, but structured relaxation. I created something called the Settle series, which is an audio course where you can download all of the audio series and it will guide you through science-based relaxation task sets that actually work. This is going to help your dog regulate their nervous system so that they are able to be calm and eventually be able to do nothing, which sounds weird, but when we're out and about, going out to eat and stuff, we need our dogs to be able to not do anything, or when we're working, or when I'm recording this podcast, I need my dog to not do anything and just lay there. So Being able to regulate their nervous system is really, really important. And I love the Settle series for this. Now, the Settle series is not the only way, but it is one way. Some other ways you can teach your dog to regulate are things like if you look up the do nothing protocol, where you shape doing nothing. That's another way. Slow treats, Zen bowls. There's a lot of fun little exercises you can do to help your dog regulate their nervous system. Okay, so that's it for this episode. I would love for you to think about whether these 13 needs are being met. And I swear to you, when you meet all of your dog's needs, training becomes so much easier because you've built that relationship with your dog. I would argue that most new trainers forget about this aspect and you end up working upstream, right? Or you have people say like, oh, like positive reinforcement didn't work for my dog. When really it's because holistically you haven't met all of their needs. And honestly, even if you're not a positive reinforcement trainer, this is still going to help your training no matter what. I would also argue that most dog parents or people who have dogs in their home don't meet all of these needs. And that's why we have so many behavioral issues with our dogs. And I share that because I don't want you to feel guilty if you're not meeting all of these needs for your dog. It's not to say if you're not meeting all 13 of these, you're a bad dog parent, right? It's about getting creative and acknowledging like, oh, I'm not meeting this one need or two of these needs. How can I meet this in a different way that works for both of us? You know, if you have a disability that prevents you from taking long line leash walks, there's other ways to give your dog that independence, freedom of sniffing, right? You just have to get a little bit more creative. I hate when people make other dog parents feel guilty just because maybe you can't do this one need. And I promise you, if you made it to the end of this episode, your dog probably has it better than most dogs out and about. And I only say this because I don't want you to feel guilty about it. It's more, these are the ways that are going to help your training. So if you really want to dive into this, I encourage you to download my free Notion template, the habits tracker, and it's linked below. Go through each category and be honest. What's missing for your dog right now? What can you do better? What can you do more often? Also remember that I do have my free school community, and engaging and posting in there will help you earn points to unlock my canine fitness course. And if you want to teach your dog how to truly relax in various environments, I encourage you to check out the Settle series. The link to purchase that course is in the description below. All right, that's it. Thanks for tuning in, and I will see you in the next episode. All right, thanks so much for listening to this episode of the Collab Dog Training Podcast. If this episode helped you, I'd love it if you subscribed, left a review, or shared it with a fellow dog parent who could use a little bit more calm in their life. And don't forget, you can find more courses and free resources at collabdogtraining.com.